Hi readers, today is a very exciting day and a super exciting read aloud because it marks the start of our next unit. Today we are entering a nonfiction reading unit, and whenever you start a new unit or begin to read in a different genre of literature, it's best to start by asking yourself, what do I already know about that? So will you ask yourself that question right now? What do I already know about reading nonfiction? Maybe think back to what you learned last year, or just think back to the last time you read a nonfiction text. What are some things that you thought about? What are some things you looked for? What are some things that helped you to understand what the text was really about? Maybe you're thinking about the way the text looks. For instance, we have text features in nonfiction. We might have a diagram, a graph, an illustration, a photograph. There's so much more. But we have often more stuff on the page than just the text itself. We often have more stuff that's supporting what is really in the text. We also are always reading for main ideas when we're reading nonfiction. We're thinking about what's the text about, what's the author really teaching me. And then another big thing that you probably started to think a lot about last year, maybe the year before, were text structures. Text structures help us to understand what the text is really about by giving us almost like a lens or almost like a giant clue to figuring out the main idea. For instance, sometimes a part or a whole text will be about a problem, and then the solution for that problem. Or maybe it will be about an event and it'll say the cause of that event and then the effect that it had after. Or maybe it's a historical text, so it's a timeline walking you through time. Or maybe it's told like a story, so it's more of a narrative. We'll talk more about text structures a little bit later on, but it's important to just have your eyes and ears out for this, especially when we start today. So we're going to get started. We're going to keep these things close in mind as we begin. And I want to just put up our next text on the screen so that you can start thinking about this. So right now, you're looking at it. It's called Rotten, and it's written by Anita Sanchez. Rotten subtitle is Vultures, Beetles, Slime, and Nature's Other Decomposers. Gross. So right away, you might be asking yourself, what might this text be teaching me? And how will I read this text? Those two questions are what we do when we're starting to orient ourselves to a text. So right now, will you just start with the first one here? What might this text be teaching me? Let's see. So maybe you're thinking about the word rotten. What could rotten really, what does rotten mean? And how could this be important to this text we're going to read? Well, we also know probably from other years of reading nonfiction that when you orient, you're not just looking at the cover or the title. You might think about like what's in the text. You might actually preview it a bit. So maybe we could read the inside blurb. Let's do that. What's that terrible smell? Plug your nose. Rotten. Something smells rotten. So before I even read this section and just reading this little title here, I'm thinking that this text is going to be about stuff that rots. So it's going to be maybe teaching us all about stuff that rots, just based off the title and that quick little subtitle here. Let's see if that's true as we read the blurb. But rotten isn't always bad. If nothing ever rotted, nothing could live. Decomposition seems like the last stop on the food chain, but it's just the beginning. When dead things rot, they give life to a host of other creatures. Creatures is an important part of this too, and I realized that there's creatures in this title. So you know what I'm realizing? That my initial thought that this is going to be all about different things that rot, I have to kind of revise that already. I'm already revising it because I'm realizing that it's going to be about more than just the stuff that rots, but maybe like all the things that help things to rot, it seems like, if that's even possible. Like maybe rotting is a good thing because it's about the creatures that do this. It's about like how it's a part of the food chain. Let's see, let's read a little bit more. So who are these decomposers? Sharks and vultures feast on animal carcasses. Okay, before I go any further, maybe I should take note of that. We have this word decomposer. It seems like a decomposition and a decomposer are important words. Maybe I should write those down. Decomposition comes up. Let's just reread that part and see. What does it mean? Decomposition seems like the last step in the food chain. So basically just summing up stuff that's rotting. So I think that decomposition is maybe just a fancy word for rotting or to rot. So then a decomposer is that something that does rot or helps rotting? Let's see. So who are these decomposers? Sharks and vultures feast on animal carcasses. Worms, maggots, and dung beetles devour decaying plant and animal matter. In fact, decomposition is happening everywhere. Oceans, forests, in your backyard. So a decomposer is maybe something that like feeds off of rotting. Maybe we have to keep reading to see. I'll put this off to the side. So just by looking at the title, the cover, the illustration, and then looking also at the inside blurb, maybe flipping through some chat. Oh, the table of contents. That could also help me now not only think about what the text is going to be teaching me, but how we'll read this text too. So this brings me to my next point, which is that we want to start to think about not only what the text will be about, but also how we'll read it. So we're still in this beginning phase. We haven't even read the first page yet, but let's just keep looking and seeing, okay, what will this text be about and how might we now read it to get the best experience out of it? It's a rotten world. Dung beetles rolling rotten. Chapter 2, scavengers eating rotten. Ew. Fungus slurping rotten. Okay, so it seems like it's going to introduce us to like the rotting world, like everything that maybe rots and things that feed off of rotting. Then it's maybe talking about the different decomposers, like those creatures that need rotting stuff or feed off, like dung beetles, scavengers, fungus. So like maybe it's creatures and also like other stuff that needs rotting. Welcome to the Rotten Log Hotel. So maybe that will be more of like a where it all lives. Gross. The mighty earthworm, what's rotting at your house. I'm kind of getting the sense that these chapters kind of build on each other. It's like slowly introducing the different decomposers, but that it doesn't stop there. It's not just about decomposers in each one. It's not just about the different creatures. It's not like creature 1, creature 2, creature 3. It gives me a bit of that, but then it kind of changes to like where they all live, how they function. Maybe like some examples, the mighty earthworm moving rotten. So like how rotten stuff functions and comes to be. Then it's helping us to think about it in our own lives. So after we've learned all this stuff, we can then apply to our own lives. Rotten people. Oh my gosh, I'm really fascinated what that's going to be about. Okay, so now we've done a lot of work. We've oriented to the text and got some ideas. We've revised our thinking already. We've also now we have to make a plan. So now let's think, okay, what can we do now, or what should we look at to learn as much as possible? I feel like we probably want to read that introduction, and then maybe we'll keep going from one chapter to the next. Wait a second. I know that nonfiction texts function a little bit differently, right? We don't have to always read it from start to finish. We can actually read what we want. So I'm thinking that maybe I'll read It's a Rotten World, and then maybe I'll read the next section, dung beetles, and try to understand those. But then maybe I'll read like Welcome to the Rotten Hotel to see like where all this stuff lives and how it functions. Okay, so let's jump right in and do that. I'm going to start reading this first section. And now let's just remember that we are trying to prepare ourselves not just for this text, but any text, anytime we read nonfiction. So whenever we start the actual reading part, we want to ask ourselves, what details are standing out to me? What is the author trying to teach me here? This kind of work I like to just think of as calling reading and noticing. So as we go, we're going to be reading and noticing the details, and then maybe taking some time to pause and think about what the author is really trying to teach us. So I'm going to leave this off to the side. This is like our little guide. And I'll just jump right in and see what details stand out to us. And then we'll try to answer those even bigger questions. It's a rotten world. Plug your nose, run for the hills. Something smells rotten. Rot is everywhere, not just in dumpsters or faraway lands. Decomposition is happening now in your backyard, your house, even between your teeth. Ew, gross. Things decompose right under our noses, from the yogurt fermenting in the fridge to the food inside our bodies. Whoa. Okay, let's just pause and think for a second. What details are standing out to us? Well, the fact that rot is everywhere is kind of crazy to me, and it kind of freaks me out a bit. I'm just going to keep reading with that in mind. So whenever I come to a part that seems important, I want to just like take note of it and maybe like take the time to really think about it a bit. So you could say that right now I'm practicing stopping and thinking about what I'm learning. Let's keep going. But wait a minute. Revolting as it seems, rot isn't necessarily bad. Ooh, that seems like it's probably a big thing that the author's going to be teaching me. Let me read on and see if I can confirm that. What would happen if nothing ever decomposed? What if every dried leaf pile of dog poop or dead animal just sat there forever and didn't rot away? Our cities would be piled high with garbage. Forests would be clogged with logs. The ocean would be full of dead fish. Think about it. So rot is everywhere, and it's also not so bad. Do you see how now I'm also thinking about what the author is trying to teach me? And I'm thinking about it like in little parts. If I just read all of this from start to finish, that would be a lot of information at once. So instead, I'm reading a little bit at a time, pausing, stopping and thinking, and then really just pondering those important details and then asking myself, what is the author really trying to teach me? I'm going to read a little bit, I'm going to finish this part here and see if I can add anything else to my current mental bulletin board of ideas. Decomposition is part of nature. Decomposing seems like the last stop on the food chain, a dead end, but nature doesn't move in a straight line. It turns in a circle. After decomposition comes new life. Whoa, that feels pretty significant. I'm going to reread that because sometimes when the ideas feel really big and kind of confusing, especially in nonfiction that you're going to be reading this year, it's important to reread. Reread. Where'd my reread post-it go? Reread, there it is. Reread. I want to reread it because it seems super, super important. It seems like that's huge for this book. So let me reread and see if I can get a better sense of what's going to be in this book. And maybe in the next part, I'm going to be reading after this one. Decomposition is part of nature. Okay, so basically this part goes from like thinking about how, hey, actually everything rots, and actually it's rotting's not so bad. And then it's talking about like not just rotting, but nature as a whole. So maybe this text is really about like, I don't know, how rotting is like a big part of nature that's like super important beyond just like what we see every day. Decomposing seems like the last stop on the food chain, a dead end, but nature doesn't move in a straight line. It turns in a circle. So this text is also going to be teaching us about how nature doesn't really ever stop. It actually is more of like a circle. Oh my gosh, it's kind of like the writing process. Interesting. After decomposition comes new life. So maybe, I'm going to make now a prediction. Maybe this text will be teaching us that rotting is not only important, but it also helps new life. So it's like an essential part of, it's not just like something we have to accept, okay, it happens. It's like super important for all living things and also future living things. So maybe the author will be showing us ways that rotting is good and things that benefit from rotting. Ooh, I'm gonna jot down my idea because I feel like, especially because it's now a new prediction, maybe this text will be about how rotting is good and it helps future life, nature. Maybe write down your prediction right now. And then in the next part, we'll be reading on to see if that comes true. So right now, before you go any farther, before you end this video, just take a second to pause and make a prediction. Because we'll be coming back to this text and reading on in this text this year, this unit. And it's important that you have some early ideas so you'll have some fun stuff to do as we keep going to check up on. And just to recap what we did today, we oriented to the text. Then we revised our thinking right away after reading just a little bit after the title. We made a plan for how we would read. Then we started reading by noticing details, pausing, stopping and thinking, rereading, and predicting. We've done a lot of work. This is the work you have to do actually every time you start a nonfiction text. So today when you go off, I would like you to try these same exact steps in any text that you start. And then afterwards, I'll be looking to see what your predictions are for the story, or the text rather, later on. So I hope that you today were able to get excited about nonfiction just as excited as I am. And I hope that when you go off today, you find some really exciting stuff you can't wait to dive into, because that's what really nonfiction is all about. It's about learning stuff. And the cool thing is that in this unit, we'll be getting to learn about things we genuinely care about. So I'm excited to see where it goes and to keep working on this with you all. Enjoy today, and I'll talk to you about it soon.